Fear Zone channel, your horror channel. And now, let's go to today's story, which is the young Kyo, and this story happened to him in the city of Divinopolis, which is in the state of Minas Gerais, and at that time, which was in the year 2013, the young Kyo was still a teenager. And it all starts like this. I live with my family in a village, which is in the rural part of the city, and near my house, there are also small farms nearby. At that time I was a teenager, and I had an older brother who was 15 years old, and we lived a quiet and normal life, and I also had 2 dogs in my house, which was a farm, where we raised some chickens. But, what happened at night, when I was sleeping in my room, I heard the howling of some animal near my house, and I woke up scared, because it was a very scary sound. At that moment my dog started barking, so I looked at my brother, but he was still sleeping in his bed, so I got out of bed and went to see through the window who made that howl. When I looked out the window, I was startled, for a huge dog was walking near the fence of my residence, but it kept walking and disappeared into the bushes. And thinking further, what I had seen was actually a very strange and scary animal, with a dark fur. I was not sure what it was, and as it was very dark at that early hour, to me it was just an animal. Anyway, I went back to sleep without worrying, but then about 15 minutes passed, and I heard my dogs fighting with something in my yard, and I thought it could only be that animal that was prowling around my residence, and my dogs seemed to be getting a beating from that animal, since they were screaming as if they were getting a beating from another dog. With all that noise, my family woke up, and I quickly looked out the window to see what was going on, and I saw my dogs rolling on the ground and fighting with that strange beast. I soon turned on the lights in the backyard of the house, and with how clear our yard was, that beast was confused and kind of scared and ran to the back of our farm. My father said that his rifle was broken, so he got a wooden handle, and then we went out together to our backyard to see if the invading beast was still around. We saw our 2 dogs barking in the back of the house, where it was a very dark place, and we started walking there slowly, and after we got to this back part of our house, we saw a strange thing happening, because that invading beast was already passing by the bedroom window of our house, where my mother was sleeping. The fact is that this beast had already passed almost half of its body through the window. At that moment desperation took over us, because my mother could be in that room. My father was fast, because he grabbed the legs of this beast and started to pull the creature back, so that it wouldn't enter through the window. But as the creature wanted to enter by any means into my house, my father started to give several sticks on the back of this beast. At that moment this animal started to growl in pain, and it gave a huge fear at the sound of this strange beast. But at that moment my father managed to take that beast out of the window and knock it to the floor of the yard in front of us, and watch that beast fall to the ground. But to our surprise, that beast quickly got up from the ground and stood up like a man, balancing on only 2 legs, and looked with a hateful face at my father because he was holding the wooden handle in his hands. And to me this beast was a werewolf, because he also looked half man and half beast. However, this creature was a little stunned, and he stood up with difficulty, yet this werewolf started to attack my father, and that's when my brother appeared in the yard together with my mother, and we started to throw several stones at this werewolf. I threw a big brick and it hit the werewolf right in the face, and with this blow, the creature fell on the ground rolling, but then it got on all 4s and started to run away. And this monster jumped over a bamboo fence that was near our yard and ran away to the vacant lot next to our farm. We quickly went back to our house and closed all the doors and windows, and we were very scared because we thought that the werewolf might be around, and the werewolf didn't like to be beaten, and maybe he was trying to come back to get revenge on us. After a few minutes, our dogs were still barking, and I was scared, and I kept looking everywhere in the bushes, but I didn't see the werewolf. But what happened to our luck and peace of mind, was that after about an hour, suddenly the police arrived in front of our house, and they said that someone had called them and warned them that our residence was being invaded. The fact is, my father explained to the military everything that had happened, that it was a dangerous beast that had done all this. The police didn't believe much in this werewolf story, and after that, the guards left to search for any suspects that dawned. Well, I didn't go back to sleep, not to be fooled. I was afraid of the werewolf coming back at any moment. I kept looking out the window, but I saw the police car passing a few times through the streets near my house, and they thought it was a man who had entered our house, and not a werewolf. As the hours passed, the day dawned and I didn't see those policemen anymore. Although I was still afraid of everything we had been through with that beast, fortunately nothing happened to my family with the attack of that werewolf on our farm, and since it was daytime I was very calm, but I didn't go to school either. Well, in the afternoon, a police car arrived at my residence, and they took my father to the police station, but when the evening came, he returned to our house, and we asked what happened, that the police took him to the police station. My father said that he was called to the police station to identify a subject who had his face all bruised, and the policeman asked if it was that man who had entered our house. Of course my father didn't recognize him, and the policeman told my father that the subject detained was caught the same day of the creature's invasion in our residence. The officers told my father that the way he wrote it on the police report, this male suspect had the same bruises. The officers forced my father to accuse the detained man, but it was no use, because he said he never saw that suspect. The police officers said that this guy was not from our town, and that he had been living in our area for a few months, but anyway, they released this suspect from custody at the police station, and my father returned to our home. With everything that happened, my father packed up his broken shotgun, and even so we spent a few frightened days in our home, especially when it got dark, because we thought that the werewolf might come back for revenge, and we even left the lights on in the backyard during the night. Time went by, and my family went back to normal life, and even today, I stay smart at night and avoid walking on foot through my neighborhood because it is very dark at late hours. But apart from all this, relating the apparition of the werewolf in my house and the man all bruised that my father saw at the police station, for sure this guy was the one that turned into this werewolf that took a beating from my family. And this werewolf story, I will never forget. Good night. Well guys, thanks for watching the video, and if you like the story, like and subscribe to our channel to receive more horror stories. Canal Fear Zone, your channel of terror. Good evening everyone, and we go to the story of today, which is Mr. Daniel, and it happened to him in the city of Itamaraju, which is in the state of Bahia, and at that time, that was in the year 2011, Mr. Daniel was 41 years old. And what I will tell you today was the worst night I had in my place, because a creature surprised me at dawn, and I had to react brutally against this werewolf. And it all started like this. I live in a very humble village in my city. I have a wife and 2 more children, and we live on a small farm. Well, as I am an ordinary person from my region, I like to have fun in the bars at night, drinking beer and sometimes playing dominoes. One night, when I was in a bar, I stayed in this place until around 11 p.m. at night, and as it was very late, I left this establishment with a friend, and we left together. While I was walking with him through a dirt road, the bus passed by a road near me and stopped at the bus stop. I saw a man get off the bus, and this guy had a bag on his back. But as the street was very dark, me and my friend hid behind a bush by the roadside, and we watched what this guy was going to do. But to our surprise, this man ended up entering the dark bush, and he disappeared through that place. As we didn't see this guy anymore, my friend and I left the place walking to our homes. As soon as I arrived at my residence, I went to have dinner, but when it was around 1 o'clock in the morning, I saw some noises in my backyard, and for sure it was my dog. I saw that my dog had torn some garbage bags, and he had made a mess all over my yard, and I was nervous about this, but soon got a broom to clean the yard, and then swept all the dirt away. At that time, my dog started barking in the direction of the bamboo fence of my residence, and my dog was very agitated, but he stayed away from the fence, and trying to warn me of something that was near the fence. I was curious, and wanted to know what my dog was barking at. So I looked over the fence, but saw nothing. But suddenly, I felt something jumping on my back, and it was something big and heavy that even fell to the ground. Realizing the danger, I turned around quickly to see what was happening, or that had attacked me, but there was no time, because a huge dark animal was very close to me, and I realized that it would attack me, grabbed my broom that was on the ground beside me, but as soon as I tried to get up, the strange creature jumped on me. At that instant, I quickly put the broom handle in front of me, and this helped me to protect myself from the beast's attempts to bite me, and at that moment I thought it would be the end of me, because my dog, despite trying to bite the creature, this beast didn't care about my dog. He was trying to kill me in pieces. Finally, with the strength and weight of this huge beast, and also with its violent attacks, the broom handle broke in my hands, but at that time that I thought would be my end, the broom handle turned into 2 wooden stakes. With this I took advantage, and I stuck the wooden stake in the belly of the creature, and this animal let out a growl like a cry. This weird creature fell beside me, and he was trying to get the wooden stake out that was stuck in his belly. I thought it was strange that creature was doing that, acting like a person, and I was amazed at the appearance of this weird animal, for I have never seen such a creature. But I was very frightened by this situation and started to run from there. And in all the noise of the fight in the backyard of my house, my wife opened the window flaps to see what was going on, and at that moment she saw the creature. My wife got a fright, because that animal was standing on only 2 legs, and she shouted, "It's a werewolf." My wife closed the window quickly, and for sure my wife was right, because I looked quickly at this creature. And it had a body like a man's body, but it was all hairy, with a dark color, and its ears and mouth were similar to a dog's, but the animal's eyes had a strange light, which was a macabre thing. Anyway, I quickly went inside my house, and grabbed my machete to protect myself from this werewolf. I was soon spying on my yard through my bedroom window, and I didn't see that beast again. I spent the whole night in fear, and also kept my wife and son calm, so that they would not cry, because if they made any noise, it could attract that werewolf. But I was relieved when the day dawned, and my wife did not even want to know, and she told me to get a firearm quickly, otherwise she would no longer sleep at home. Well, I talked to some acquaintances, and managed to buy a used rifle from a neighbor. I even warned this friend about what happened to me, because I bought the gun from him. But even after a few days, when it got late at night, I got smart, and I was afraid that the werewolf would show up again, because he might want to take revenge for the wound I had inflicted on him. But if this werewolf came back to my place again, I would shoot him with my gun. But otherwise, almost a month had passed since the werewolf's appearance, and fortunately the creature had not returned. One dawn I began to hear many barking dogs in the distance, but after a while, I soon began to hear the dogs in my neighborhood barking a lot. That instant I was already on alert, because it could be that werewolf. I went to look out the window to see something, but I saw nothing, but I was still very scared. Suddenly that man appeared on my street, that man who got off the bus and went into Mata Escura on that day that I was attacked by the werewolf, and although I didn't know this guy, even so, I went armed to talk to him in front of my house, and noticed that this man was fixing some bandages on his belly. The fact is that I warned him that he would be in danger walking through this place because I was attacked by a werewolf a short time ago inside my own house. When I told this guy that I bought a rifle to kill the creature, the stranger said that he was only spending a few days at his aunt's house, who lived nearby, and he knew nothing about this werewolf story. This guy didn't want to talk to me and left. But until today, after many years, I have never seen that guy walking in my region, and I haven't seen any other report of this werewolf in my village either. And even at this time today, I remember the attack of this creature that luckily I managed to survive and only took a few scratches, but for me, this guy bandaged in the belly is the suspect of having become the werewolf that attacked me because he was wounded in the same place where I stuck the stake in the belly of the werewolf, and this happened on the same day that I saw this suspicious man getting off the bus in my neighborhood. And for you, that guy was or was not the werewolf remains the question. But the experience I learned is that today I take care to go out at night because these creatures exist and attacks people. If you like the story, subscribe and leave your like to receive new content from the channel. Until next. Good evening everyone, and now then, let's go to today's story, which is from Mr. Renato, and this happened to him in the city of São Leopoldo, which is in the state of Rio Grande do Sul, and at that time, which was in the year 2002, Mr. Morrow was 47 years old. And it all started like this. I lived in a rural area of my city for many years, and then I moved to a common neighborhood in my city, but as I had the habit, I always went back to visit the rural area, to meet up with my old friends, and sometimes I even spent the whole day in the farms of these acquaintances. But one time, I went to the rural area to fish in the river with a colleague, and we went by car, and as it was a weekend, we were catching fish until around midnight. As it was very late, that was our time to leave. So we started the car and took our way back to our homes. Well, everything was normal that night. We had caught many fish and were happily going back to our homes. But what happened next, while I was driving along a dirt road, was that I saw a strange movement of a horse through the fence of a pasture, and soon I also saw that there were two or more shadows of some strange animal attacking the horse. With that, my colleague stopped the car in front of the pasture. We got out of the car and went to the farm's enclosure and started to look closer, and to our amazement, we saw that there were two huge animals that were very strange. They looked like two monkeys with big ears, and these creatures surrounded and attacked the horse and wouldn't let him run away, and these creatures also had a kind of light in their eyes, which seemed to be lit. And this was a very scary thing indeed, but those two beings kept attacking and biting the horse, which was already exhausted from the fight and would end up dying there. At this time, my partner picked up a rock in the middle of the road and threw it at those creatures, and a strange thing started to happen, because those two beasts stopped biting the horse, and they kept staring at us. I threw another rock at them too, to see if they would scare them away, but then, my partner and I had a surprise, for not only did those two beasts get up and stand on two legs only, as if they were men, but these werewolves widened their eyes in anger and came walking towards us, and by the looks of it they were going to attack us. The fact is, at this moment, we were quite frightened by this scene, and we got into the car, started the engine, and began to leave the place, and as we drove away along the dirt road, my friend and I talked and agreed that these creatures were werewolves, for these beings had a body type almost similar to that of a man, but hairy, and these creatures also had a snout, and their head looked like that of a dog. After this fright, I arrived at my home, which was in a nearby neighborhood, and already inside my house, I thought about these two dangerous beasts that were werewolves, and that they really exist, because the old people said that they had seen these beasts around the regions many years ago. After a few hours, the day dawned, and I went to talk to my fishing friend, and we drove back in front of that farm, where we saw the two werewolves attacking the horse. But the owner was at the gate of this place, and so we stopped to talk to this man about his horse and what had hurt the animal at dawn, and so we told this man that his animal was attacked by two werewolves and that we passed by nearby, and we saw this scene of these two creatures hurting his horse, and the owner of the farm realized that we had spoken the truth, and he showed us the horse that had been attacked by the two creatures, and we saw that this animal had several wounds all over its body, because it had been bitten several times by the two beasts. But the man then said that he was very lucky, because he woke up with the barking of his dogs near the paddock, and soon after, he saw his horse all wounded near his house, and so he took his shotgun and kept watch until dawn to catch the person who had done all this evil to his animal. But when we finished all this talk, my friend and I went back to our neighborhood, and to feel better, I called the police and told them that there were two maned wolves lost in the neighborhood nearby, and that I had almost been attacked by these animals. The fact is that time went by, and I was recovering from the trauma I had experienced with those werewolves, and until one day, I went to visit a friend of mine who worked as a foreman on a large farm in the region, and getting there, I picked some fruit to take away, and also had lunch with my friend the foreman and catching up on our conversations. I saw that there were two strange men working on this farm, and asked my friend if they were new workers on the property, and my friend said no, and who arranged these two guys was a friend of his who had met these guys working on a construction site of helpers. But what happened was that these two guys came to sit at the table with me for lunch too, and I noticed that one of them had a tattoo of two wolves together on his arm, with a phrase written, "Brothers Wolves," and I saw that the other brother also had a tattoo like that. Well, I began to tell my story that I spent with those two creatures a few days ago, and those two guys were not funny while I told my story, but my friend Foreman was very interested in what I told. At that time I saw my friend's dogs tied to the collar, and asked my friend why he did this with his dogs. Then he told me that his dogs did not like the two brothers, and wanted to attack them for no reason. So this my friend Foreman had to arrest his dogs. Well, as soon as lunch was over, I stayed the whole afternoon on my friend's farm, and I noticed that those two brothers were looking in my direction, and it was like that until it was time for me to leave the property. Anyway, I went back to my house. I went on with my life as usual, and after a few days had passed, I went to the farm of the old man where the horse was attacked by the two werewolves to see how the animal was doing, and the owner of the horse told me something amazing, for he told me that he stayed up several nights waiting for the creatures to return, until one night, the old farmer saw these two strange animals hiding inside his farm. Then the old man started shooting at the two creatures, and they ran and jumped the farm fence and disappeared. I was very worried about these creatures, because still these two werewolves were still prowling around my neighborhood. Finally, the other day, I went back to my friend's farm, where those two brothers worked, and arriving at the property, my friend told me that one of the werewolf brothers came back to the farm, and he asked for an advance of money from the service they were providing, because his other brother was shot, and then the guy received the money and left. Well, as the weeks went by, the two brothers disappeared, and I never saw them again, and of course, I began to suspect that these brothers were the two werewolves, because the old farmer said that he shot these creatures, and sure enough, he shot the gun at one of the creatures, and also one of the brothers appeared shot, to me, they could be the two werewolves that attacked the horse. But one thing I know, I saw two werewolves in the pasture, and it was real. And that was my horror story. And before we go on to the next werewolf story, please like the video, and subscribe to the Zone of Fear channel. The Fear Zone channel. Good evening everyone, and today's report is from Mr. Loro, and this happened to him in the year 2001 when he was 35 years old and was in the city of Itabira, which is in the state of Minas Gerais. And today, I'm going to talk about a terrifying and surprising thing where the creature, which seemed to be a werewolf, did something macabre in my neighborhood, and whether it was justice or not, you decide. And it all started like this. I lived in a neighborhood on the outskirts of my city, and my neighbor, who was a good friend of mine, he liked to barbecue on his farm on weekends, but one Friday, this neighbor called me to join his barbecue, and this was around 9 o'clock at night. So I agreed, and ended up going to his residence, and then we lit the grill, and began to roast the meat. But while we were preparing the barbecue, we were talking, and also looking at those dark woods, and while we were watching the darkness of the place. But suddenly we saw something strange, because there was an unknown man, and he was walking through the trees in the bush, and it seemed that he didn't want to be seen by anyone. However, my neighbor and I climbed on top of the roof of the house, and we looked into the woods to find this suspicious walker, but the guy disappeared. We thought it might be some maniac walking in that darkness. Well, but time went by, and when it was around 2 o'clock in the morning, we heard many barking dogs near the farm, and looking around the property, we saw a strange thing, because there was a kind of animal running around near the farm, but that beast came walking on 4 legs in our direction, but the animal realized that we saw it, and strangely, the animal hid in some woods near the fence of the farm. What I found strange was the eyes of that animal, because even the creature hidden, you could see his eyes in the dark, and it was scary, because they shone a lot, and also the size of that creature seemed to be very large. At this time, my friend and I stood there watching, and seeing what kind of animal it was, but soon this creature disappeared from that place. Finally, it didn't take long before the dogs were barking at the fence. My neighbor and I couldn't see anything because of the darkness, but even so, we thought it was that animal, and we started throwing several rocks into the dark woods, and to our amazement, an unbelievable thing happened, because that strange beast came running out of the woods, but he was standing up, and growling in pain, and it looked like a very hairy man, and it fell to the ground, and then the beast got up, and for sure, one of the stones that we threw at the beast wounded it seriously. We were afraid, with the noises that this monster made, but then, this werewolf entered the dark woods and disappeared. My neighbor and I ran to the house, scared, and locked ourselves in, looking through the window, to see if the werewolf was still around. At this, my neighbor took his hunting gun, and we stood on the slab of the house waiting for the werewolf to return, but the werewolf still didn't appear. However, we still heard many barking dogs in the distance, and we were alerted by these signs. Finally, after some time, the silence returned, and we were talking. My neighbor also thought that the beast was a werewolf, and of course, we were worried and very afraid for the rest of the night. It was like this until the day. However, when 2 days had passed since the appearance of the werewolf, my neighbor called me to see something that was happening in the bushes, and it was around 9 o'clock at night. I went into my neighbor's house, and we went up on the roof to see what was happening. As soon as I got to the top of the house, I saw 2 police cars 100 meters away, and it seemed that the police were looking for someone or something in that place, which was a thicket, and after all that movement, the military ended up getting something big out of the woods. My neighbor and I were curious and went to the cops, because we thought they had caught the werewolf. Well, when we arrived on the scene, we saw that the police took from the middle of the woods was the body of a man, and for sure was that walker that we saw the day that my neighbor made the barbecue, and maybe this stranger was running away from the werewolf that night, but this dead man was also attacked by some kind of beast, because his body the wound marks were as if he was attacked by some kind of very large beast. The policeman asked the residents if anyone saw any wild beasts, but the people said they saw nothing, and my neighbor and I stayed put so as not to become suspects in this story. After that day, I became more scared of the werewolf and what these creatures are capable of, so I kept watch at my place at night, so as not to be surprised by these creatures. But as the days passed, I got to know something amazing, because the wanderer that the police found dead in the woods, I found out that this suspect was a maniac wanted by the police, in which he had already committed several serious crimes that I can't talk about here, and the werewolf did me a favor by putting an end to this man, and you know, the kind of evil that this maniac planned to do in the city. And for me, this maniac was attacked by that werewolf that I saw at dawn. The fact is that the werewolf was no longer seen, and nobody knew anything about this beast. At last, these creatures exist and attack people, but there are also maniacs walking around in the early morning hours, which can be much worse than a werewolf. Thanks for watching the video, and if you like it, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Fear Zone Channel, your channel of terror. Good evening everyone, and now then, we go to the story of today, which is Mr. Valdo, and this happened to him in the city of Santo Antonio de Jesus, which is in the state of Bahia, and at that time, which was in the year 2008, Mr. Valdo had 31 years. And to begin my story, I live in a rural village in my city, and there, most of the residents are simple people, but in my region also, people like to hunt armadillos. So, one weekend, a friend of mine called Alex came to my house, and he invited me to hunt armadillos in an area in his neighborhood, and as I was not doing anything, I agreed to go on this hunt, and also took my rifle and flashlight, and took my 2 dogs to help hunt. So, my friend and I went on foot to this place to look for armadillos, and we arrived in this forest around 8 o'clock at night. And after a long time in the bush, hunting animals, what was happening was that we couldn't catch any armadillos, maybe because many people hunted in the bush, and it was very hard to find them, and we didn't want to go back to our homes empty-handed, so we walked through the vegetation, and we went deeper and deeper into the bush, practically far away from any village or house, and in this remote place we caught the first armadillo. It was already late at this time, and we had to leave, but we were excited and wanted to catch another hunt, so we could have 1 armadillo each. After a while, we caught another armadillo, and satisfied with our kill, we decided to leave the forest, and started to take the road back to our houses. After walking for a few minutes, we began to smell smoke somewhere in the woods, and we passed a place near some trees, and saw by the light of our flashlights a fire on the ground, but there was no one there, so we found that the smell of smoke was coming from that place, and on the ground there were some clothes and shoes. We found that place strange, but we left it alone, and kept walking to get to our houses. But when we were on a trail in the middle of the bush, my dog started barking. I looked, and saw nothing, but then, my 2 dogs came running and seemed to be going after something, but what happened was that I and my friend began to hear one of my dogs moaning and screaming in the distance, and it seemed that he had been attacked by some animal. I was afraid and scared, and I didn't really know what was happening, but the noises of my dog's screams were fading away, and it seemed that the animal that got my dog was going further and further away and taking my dog, and since I was armed with a shotgun, my colleague and I went after my dog quickly in order to save him. So we started walking, and passing the light of the flashlight through the vegetation, and then my partner told me to turn off the flashlight, and we stayed still in the middle of the dark woods, and soon we started to hear the sound of one of my dogs barking, and then we ran in that direction, and we arrived in another part of the forest, where we saw my other dog barking at something. Then we started to look around, and we saw the shape of a huge beast, and it was carrying my dog stuck in its mouth, but my other dog wouldn't let the creature take my other dog, and as that strange beast didn't want to let go of my dog, I shined the flashlight on that creature, and at that moment, that beast got scared, and looked at us, and let go of my dog. But cleverly this creature ran into the bush and disappeared, and I saw that it was a huge animal, like a deformed dog, but it was huge, and I got a fright, because it still had a strong light in its eyes, which looked like two lit lights. As I didn't see that animal anymore, so I walked forward with the rifle in my hands, to get my dog, and when I got close to my dog, he started to get better. But soon, and I heard a growling noise, and my friend threw the light of the flashlight in the direction of a tree, and we saw something strange, for that beast was behind the tree hiding. I pointed my gun in the direction of the creature, but that creature began to growl more angrily, and that animal ended up getting up and stood on two legs. At that time I realized that it was a werewolf, and I shot it in the trunk of the tree, and that creature cleverly didn't come out from behind the tree. So I reloaded my gun, but at that instant that werewolf ran into the woods and disappeared into the darkness. By this time, I was pretty scared, and my friend and I started running through the woods desperately, and I kept wondering if the creature was still after us. But just as well, we reached a dirt road near a village, and with this we were a little calmer, and at least nothing else happened. After walking for a while, we arrived at my friend's house, and I bandaged my dog, because he took a serious bite from the werewolf, but otherwise, we spent the rest of the night awake, and talking about what was that creature that got our dog, and of course, the most obvious thing we came up with in this conversation was that it was for sure a werewolf, and also, that fire lit in the woods and those clothes and shoes that we saw in the woods was someone who turned into the werewolf we saw. But when the day dawned, I went back to my house and kept thinking that these werewolves really exist. As the days went by, my hunting friend and I kept thinking how to alert the people in the nearby villages to warn them that there was a werewolf prowling around the area, and also, for sure, no one would believe our report, and what we did was that we just wrote on some posters that there was a werewolf around. We spread these leaves in the neighborhood without anyone seeing us, and with this attitude, our hope was that those who saw this creature would read the leaflets and end up leaving the area, because as far as I know, I learned, is that a man who sees this creature, and if you meet one day a beast like this in front of you, and survive, do this, at least put up warning posters around the neighborhood, warning people. I do not know if this plan worked or not, but at least I did not know of any other appearance of this werewolf until today, and also never went hunting armadillos until today, because I do not want to be hunted by a werewolf again. Good night. If you liked the story, give a like, and if you are not subscribed yet, then subscribe to the channel Fear Zone to receive new videos from the channel. Until the next.
Fear Zone Channel, your horror channel. Good evening everyone, and the story today is of a young man named Valdo, and this story happened when he was still a boy, and it was in the year 2001, in the city of Catanduva, which is in the state of São Paulo, Brazil. And it all started like this. I lived in an ordinary neighborhood in my city, and at that time, next to my house, there was a vacant lot, where sometimes, when I was a child, I played in this place, with other boys the same age as me. One day, I took my toys in the afternoon, to this vacant lot to play, and I was alone, because there were no children around to play with me. While I was having fun with my cars and superhero dolls, suddenly I saw a strange man, and he seemed to be a wanderer, and he was talking to Mrs. Sebastiana, who lived on the other side of the vacant lot, and this woman worked with witchcraft, and did various magical works for people. As I was there near them, I overheard some of the conversation between the two, and Mrs. Sebastiana took a bag of something, and gave it to this man, who seemed to be a walker, and this witch told this man, that he should not come around the neighborhood anymore, or she would take drastic measures. And right after this strange man spoke to my neighbor witch, he came into the empty lot where I was playing, and this man didn't see me, and stood for a while in the middle of the bush stirring the earth, and it looked like he was burying something in the ground. At that moment, I had a bad feeling about this walker. I was afraid of him. I quickly put my toys in my box, left that place hidden from the walker, went back to my house, and already inside my residence, I put my toys away in my room, and then I started watching TV. I stayed in the living room until about 11 p.m., which was more or less the time I slept, because I went to school in the morning, and had to wake up early. Then, I went to my room, and before I went to sleep, I got my toys to play a little, and I lost my superhero toy that I had. I looked for my toy all over my room, but I couldn't find anything. Then I looked all over my house, and I didn't see this toy, so I thought, it must be in the wasteland, because when that man walked by, I quickly grabbed my toys to get out of the place, and so I must have left that toy behind. Well, I was worried, because I had to wake up in the morning to go to school, and as there were several students passing by the vacant lot, who went to school in the morning, some child might find my toy, and take it away. Anyway, and I was afraid to go out in the street, at that time of the night from inside my house, to look for my toy in the lot, because I looked out the window and saw no one on the street at that time, and it was past midnight, so I dragged a table to the wall of my house, and climbed up there to see if I could find my toy in the lot next door. But at that time, it was very dark through the woods, and I couldn't see anything there, so I took courage, and took the keys to my house, and opened the gate of my residence very slowly, so that my parents wouldn't see me, so I went out on the sidewalk, but at that time my dog also followed me, and came with me, and we went to the vacant lot, which was next to the house, and as soon as I got into that bush in the vacant lot, and I could see a little bit, because of the street lamp, but I went further and further away, to see if I could find my toy. Suddenly my dog started barking for something, and I went in the direction of a very tall bush that had on the ground. I stood looking, to see what was happening, but soon I got scared with what I saw, because something was walking hidden by that vegetation, and it was some kind of animal, very similar to a black dog, and I was moving away from this beast, and I started calling my dog to get out of there. The fact is that I saw this animal's face, and it scared me, because this animal's eyes were not something ordinary, and it had a very strong glow, almost like a light. And with the danger that I was in, suddenly I saw the forest moving, and this animal made a very thick growl, and came out of the middle of the vegetation very fast, and advanced on my dog, who was next to him barking, but fortunately, my animal managed to escape from the attack of this beast, and it was at this moment, that I saw this whole creature in front of me, at least about 8 meters away. And it was a strange kind of animal, similar to a monkey, but it had a snout like a dog's, and The fur of this animal was all frayed on its body. It was a huge creature, and after this animal attacked my dog, suddenly it stood up like a man, with only 2 legs, and fortunately, my dog stayed close to this werewolf, barking and distracting him, and at that moment I took advantage and ran to my house, and I was so scared that I couldn't even feel my body, but I quickly opened the gate, entered my residence, and so already in my house I closed the door, and woke up my father to solve this dangerous situation. He woke up a little scared, to see me like this, and asked me what was happening. I told my father that I had seen a werewolf, in the vacant lot next door, but my father did not doubt me, and he went to look out the window, and my father saw our dog barking near the gate of the house. This happened because I closed my gate quickly, when I fled the werewolf, and the dog stayed outside. Well, my father was brave. He took a wooden handle, picked up my dog from the street and brought him into the house, and I was afraid that he would be attacked, but fortunately, nothing happened, and the werewolf didn't come. But then, my father saw me so scared, that he didn't want to scold me, and just told me, that I shouldn't leave the house at night, and with all that happened that night, I didn't even sleep, so I kept thinking, and looking out the window, thinking that this creature could be near my house, so I fell asleep. Soon the day came. I talked directly to my father. I told him everything about what happened, and how this werewolf was, and he also explained to me better, what this creature was. I learned, that it would be a man who would turn into this werewolf, and that these creatures would only appear in the late hours of the night. After this conversation, my father went with me to the wasteland, and we stayed there looking for my toy, and what happened was that the wanderer who talked to Ms. Sebastiana was looking for something in the desert. But after a while, this strange man left the place, and after a few minutes, I ended up finding my toy, and I also found the bag that Anderilho had won from Ms. Sebastiana, and for sure, that man was looking for that bag. I was curious, and I opened that bag, and what was inside was salt, because I had tasted some. Well, at the time I didn't understand anything, and I threw that little bag of salt back into the forest, and since I had already found my toy, I left the wasteland with my father. I was traumatized by the whole story for several months, and at night I didn't leave the house, just for fear that this would happen, that I would see this werewolf again. But after years that passed this story with me, I understood better what a werewolf was. I learned that these beasts in the form of a man ask for salt in certain houses, in order not to attack them in the form of a werewolf. Well, I ended up relating the werewolf to Anderilho, because I saw that man twice in my neighborhood, and this guy asked my neighbor for salt, and it was the same bag of salt that I found in a vacant lot, and for sure, when Anderilho went back there, he was looking for that bag of salt. But some years passed, and one day I went to clarify this story with Mrs. Sebastiana. About this case, I explained everything, what had happened to me, in which I was almost caught by a werewolf. I also talked about Anderilho and the salt. Ms. Sebastiana told me, that there are things that human beings can't and don't need to know, and that supernatural events have to remain hidden, and if unprepared people know these secrets, they risk losing their lives and being tormented by the spirit world, and the witch didn't reveal anything to me. I didn't want to insist on knowing more about this story, because of the witch's warning, for I knew nothing about these matters deeply, nor did I want to get involved with the supernatural. Well, and thinking about my dog, he was a hero that day of the werewolf's appearance, because he distracted the creature and I managed to escape. If you ever find a bag of salt thrown around, be careful, because it might be from a werewolf. And I suspect, that the werewolf was looking for the bag of salt, in the vacant lot that day when it appeared, and for sure it was the tramp who became the werewolf, who appeared to me that night. Well guys, if you like this story, subscribe to our channel to receive more werewolf stories. Until the next werewolf video. Fear Zone Channel, your horror channel. Good evening everyone, and now we go to the story of today, which is the young Enrique, and this story happened to him, in the city of Franca, which is in the state of São Paulo, Brazil, and at that time that was in the year 2014, Enrique was a teenager. And today, I am going to tell you something horrible, that happened to my family, in which a creature wanted to do something terrible to us. And it all started like this. I live in an ordinary neighborhood in my city, with my parents and a younger brother. But once, my father took vacation from his job. With this, he said, that we would spend a few days on our uncle's farm. So my father took us by car, and after a while of travel, we arrived at our relative's farm. I was very happy, because everything was new to me in that place, and there were many fruit trees, and also many woods around the farm. But when night came, I was surprised, because the place was total darkness, which was very scary. The fact is that one day at the farm, I was sleeping normally, in one of the rooms of the property, together with my younger brother, until I started to hear the barking of the farm dogs near the fence. I looked quickly out the window, to the backyard, and this was around 5 o'clock in the morning, but what happened, is that there was a man passing through the bush. But something strange started to happen, because my uncle's horse started to get nervous with that stranger in the bushes. The horse walked fast to the sides, and it seemed that he wanted to attack that man. I thought this was strange, because this animal was very tame, but the horse ended up jumping the fence of the farm, and went after that man, but quickly the stranger entered the neighboring farm and managed to escape from the horse. And I didn't even know what to think of this situation, so I let it go, and went back to sleep, and when morning came, the horse, thank God, was on our property. Well, I was playing on the farm with my brother, until I looked at the neighbor's farm, and I saw a man who was doing some kind of masonry work, and it looked like he was remodeling the house there. I kept looking and realized that it was the same guy that I had seen enter this property early in the morning, and that the horse tried to attack this man. After that, what happened was that one night, it suddenly started to rain hard, and I was in a state where I couldn't sleep or wake up in my bedroom bed, but I could hear some footsteps of something walking outside the yard, and to me, it was the dogs from my uncle's farm, who maybe were hiding from the rain, and they were near or under my bedroom window. But even in that half-asleep state, I could hear something, that was doing a fast breathing, and then I looked quickly, and realized that the flap of the bedroom window was opening. At that moment, something happened that I woke up very fast and scared, because my little brother, who was sleeping closer to the window, started screaming desperately, and I woke up very scared at that instant, with those screaming noises. And as soon as I looked out the window, I saw a sort of hairy man, and with yellowish eyes, like lights, and he was standing at my bedroom window. I was terrified by what I was seeing, because that figure passed his arms through the grating of the bedroom window, and this creature was holding my brother's foot. He was screaming trying to get loose, and this monster was pulling his foot, and this thing didn't want to let him go. In desperation I started to scream, but I grabbed a wooden stool that was near my bed. I started to hit the creature's arm with the stool, and after many hits I gave that being, he let go of my brother's foot, and soon the monster ran away, and I could see this whole beast through the window, and to me, this animal that attacked my brother through the window, was a werewolf. And with all the noises of confusion, my father and my uncle came to my rescue in the living room, turned on the light with great haste, and when they looked out the window, the werewolf was already gone. I told them both that it was a werewolf, because the beast's head was similar to a dog's, and it had very big ears, and its muzzle was like a dog's, and this animal stood on only 2 legs like a man. My father spoke to my brother and me to calm us down, and soon after I saw my uncle walking past us, with a rifle in his hands. He was walking to the farmyard, and the dogs were still barking, but I heard 2 rifle shots, and sure enough, it was my uncle who made those shots, but then my uncle came home very scared, and called my father, and the 2 of them talked, and said, that nobody would sleep that night, because my brother and I were right, because there really was a werewolf prowling around the house. The fact is that we spent that whole early morning frightened, but fortunately the werewolf didn't come back, but time passed, until dawn. Well, my brother and I no longer wanted to leave the house to play on the farm, because we thought the werewolf would come back for us. With this happening, my father decided to leave my uncle's farm, because we were in a state of shock and fear. My uncle told my father, that the creature that appeared on the farm was huge, and that this creature would have broken a part of the property's wire fence, and this happened while the beast was running away from the shots, but he said that he saw the beast from afar, and wasn't sure what kind of beast it was. But after a while, some neighbors also came to my uncle's property, to talk to him, and those hillbillies talked in a way, that they looked like they were going to hunt the creature. When late afternoon came, my father was starting the car, to leave the farm and return to our house in town, but as soon as we left the farm with the car, we passed some dirt roads, and soon my father saw a man on the street, and he stopped the vehicle to talk to the guy. I saw that it was the bricklayer, who was working on the farm next to my uncle's house, but he had his arm all bandaged and in a cast. And this mason said that he had an accident at work and injured his arm, but my father warned him that there was a dangerous animal roaming around the neighborhood, and that he should be careful, and my father also warned him, that some country bumpkins had formed a hunting party, to capture this animal that appeared at night. After this conversation, we continued our trip. Finally we arrived at our house in the city, and I was still very afraid, because I often remembered what the beast that appeared in the window looked like. As time went by, I began to suspect that the bricklayer could be the werewolf, because he was wounded in the same arm, where I hit the werewolf with the wooden stool, and also that day, in the morning, my uncle's horse tried for no reason to attack the bricklayer. After some time, I learned that the mason disappeared from the property he was working on, and this happened after my uncle warned his neighbors that there was a werewolf attacking their property. And sure enough, this suspicious mason became afraid of the hunter's bumpkins, and he fled the village. I do not know if the mason could be this creature, but I distrust this guy, and also, today I am already a man, and I know what I saw in the window, and what caught my brother, and it was a werewolf. Good night. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and leave your likes.